Hello, this is the Steven out, and yes, we're back with another Harry Potter movie review. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we will be reviewing the 2007 Harry Potter film, Harry Potter and Order of the Phoenix, again released in 2007. After the huge success of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, the previous director from that film decided to pretty much step down and surprisingly did not return. Instead, they hired the director of David Yates, who, as far as I know, continued to direct the rest of the Harry Potter films, and I think he's also directed the Fantastic Beasts films. I'm not entirely sure. This film was received generally positive and is considered an absolute fan favorite. So the question is, do I still feel that praise is well deserved, or do I think it is slightly overrated? Well, before we do that, as always, let's jump straight into the cast. The cast here, first off, the original trio is again still back. Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, Ron Weasley, still portrayed by Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, and Rupert Grint, respectively. I do like how, I think out of all the Harry Potter films, I think this is, Daniel Radcliffe, I think, is his best performance as Harry Potter in this installment than I think all the others combined. Of course, we have some of our our original favorites. Hagrid, still portrayed by Robbie Coltrane, is back, great as always. We also have, again, the rest of the Weasley, Ginny, and the twins, Fred and George, all great as always, still portrayed by the same actors and actresses. And of course, we have the character, we have, of course, Seamus and Dean Thomas back. But I really love this time Neville Longbottom here. Neville was always a fan favorite of mine, and what I especially like, we get to learn a little bit more about him in this installment, and that for me is arguably one of my, if not favorite bits about this film. We get to know a bit more about him, and just find out really how much of an interesting character he really is. Of course, we have the character of Cho Chang coming back, and really this will be the last time she would have at least a huge, significant role in the story. But here we will have a very brand new character, coming to this film, and will become essentially a favorite recurring character from here on, and that's the character of Luna Lovegood, portrayed by Ivana Lynch. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that name right. And honestly, she's just great. She's a fan favorite. I'll talk more about her in the review, but she's just so great, and everyone loves her. Because I have the Weasley, Mr. and Mrs. Weasley back again, great as always. We have Mad-Eye Moody once again back, and I really love his character. Granted, he mostly plays a minor recurring role, but it's fun to have him back nonetheless. We also have a new character being introduced, Nymphadora Tonks, portrayed by Natalia Tena, probably butchering that name, but she's just so great, and I wish we got more screen time with her, but the little she's on screen is absolutely, fantastic, remarkable, and most importantly, just a beloved addition. We also again have Dumbledore once again back, still portrayed by Michael Gambon. The character is done a bit differently in this film, but it's good different because it serves the story. Of course, we have Professor McGonagall once again back, and still portrayed by the same actress, Maggie Smith, great as always, and of course Professor Snape, portrayed by the always incomparable and ever seen stealing Alan Rickman. We also here have Sirius Black once again back, portrayed by Gary Oldman, and of course we have the character of Remus Lupin, once again portrayed by David Thewlis, probably butchering that name, but it's just so great to have him back. I missed those two from the third film, so it's great, in all honesty, to have them back. We also here have another minor character of. Here we have the character of Kingsley Shacklebolt, portrayed by George Harrison. Now, it's just a minor role, but it's just it just like catches you, and honestly, it's even as a minor role, he's definitely memorable. and really, leaves very much a very unique impression, at least on me especially. And I always enjoyed, him in the role. And of course, we have another Hogwarts denizen returning in the character of Sybil, who of course we remember really from the third film, and she's back for the fifth film. She is portrayed by Emma Thompson, and again, great as always. Really a minor role, and even though she's great, I'm sure there's a fan favorite to many. I guess she was a character never really on my radar, but I can see why she does have her fan base. And of course, we have the character of Dolores Umbridge, portrayed by Imelda Staunton, probably butchering that name very badly. Now, this is a character that often is, for me, is a character we love to hate, and she's considered more evil than Voldemort. Though looking at her, you probably wouldn't think that, but trust me, when I get further into the film, you will see just, how evil she is. Her almost, just the way she's on screen, will agree. You would think she is definitely more evil than Voldemort. Here, of course, we have some of our protagonists. Lord Voldemort is once again back, portrayed by Ralph Fiennes. Again, I best know him as M in the James Bond films, especially from the Craig era, but he's just great. We also have some of his most loyal followers / Death Eaters. Lucius Malfoy, Draco's dad, portrayed by Jason Isaac, and of course Bellatrix Lestrange, portrayed by Helena Bonham Carter. Honestly, you just can't go wrong with that kind of casting. You also here, of course, have other, characters back. Mr. Filch, again, portrayed really great by David Bradley. Tom Felton, once again, back as Draco Malfoy, another fan favorite. But really, I think their roles are more comedic this time around, and especially Draco's. And he's no longer that threatening or villainous. That's really going to come in the next one. We, of course, have Cornelius Fudge, once again back, still portrayed by the same actor as in the previous films. We're also here for Crabbe and Goyle, once again back. And again, just like Draco, more really for comedic. We also here have of the character of Phineas Flitwick, once again back, minor role. We have the Dursleys all back. And really, this cast, again, what I've always appreciated about the Harry Potter films, and especially its casting, is how they got really big, British stage actors and TV stars to participate in this franchise. Just how they managed to do that astounds me to this day. We begin this film, I would almost say almost depressingly, with the usual title opening, only to go to a park where Harry is all by himself, still reflecting on the events of the previous film with Cedric's death. He then focuses on this little boy who gets picked up by his mother. Now, I love that little scene, that little clip, because it shows, despite what Harry wants in the world, he really wants, his parents back, his mother. And that is interrupted by Dudley, who comes in. We get a little dialogue how he's pretty much been beating up little kids, and he's a teenager. He then goes and tries to taunt him, first with the death of Cedric, teasing, Cedric his boyfriend, but he then cuts it deeper by, teasing the fact that his mother's dead, he doesn't have a mother. And Harry then just loses it, comes up to him, and sticks his wand up at his chin. Now, the rest of the guys around, Dudley, laugh it off. However, Big D is scared because he knows, again, that Harry is a wizard and can actually harm him with spells, and he is genuinely terrified. And then just as that's happening, suddenly clouds start coming. It's storm, wind, and Dudley's asking, "Is Harry had something to do with this?" And he says no. Dudley's friends quickly run away, and of course Harry and Dudley run off. I love this scene because it shows how Harry is emotionally at this point, and this gives me an insight that this film might be more character-driven compared to previous films where I wouldn't say that they completely ignored character development, but it was more focused on the world and action rather than the characters. So I like that this film went in that direction. Just as Harry and Dudley are essentially running away, they end up, coming face to face with Dementors, which we haven't seen really since the third film. They make their return. However, Dudley can't see Dementors because it's something that only witches and wizards can see. However, Muggles, which Dudley is, can at least feel the presence of, Dementors. Harry tries to fight him off, and one of them is about to give Dudley the Dementor's kiss, but Harry uses his Patronus charm to help save Dudley and, save them from, essentially death. A squib, which essentially is a witch or wizard a child born into a witch or wizard family but doesn't pertain any magic, comes along and is sent there by essentially Dumbledore and takes Harry and Dudley back to, their home, if you would call it that. As soon as they get there, they find that Dudley is not right, and when they ask what happened, the only thing Dudley could do was just point at Harry. Mr. Dursley, is about to, rip into Harry, only for one of the famous Howler letters to come flying in, and essentially telling that Harry has just been expelled from Hogwarts School because of his use of underage magic. Which, of course, Mr. Dursley is absolutely, happy about. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley take Dudley, obviously, to go and get him fixed with whatever happened to him. But, Harry is locked in his room and, mad at himself, kind of isolated. And it's really shows that Harry is different this time around in this film. He's not, while he's been in previous films, he's clearly not right. And just as that's happening, a group of witches and wizards come. One we've already seen in previous films, Mad-Eye Moody, but this time he's accompanied with two other notable witches and wizards that will become essentially pivotal to the series. Nymphadora Tonks, who is a fan favorite, and I think one of the most underrated, at least, characters in the film series, Kingsley Shacklebolt, who I find to be, there's something about his voice and the way he presents himself to be, in my opinion, a far more memorable character than Nymphadora Tonks, and that's saying something, because I'm pretty sure it'd be definitely the other way around. And they get on their brooms and they fly all over London to go to their to this essentially headquarters. And essentially, these witches and wizards are part of an order known as Order of the Phoenix, a group founded by Dumbledore that was used in the First Wizarding War to fight Voldemort and his Death Eaters during the First War. Many veterans from that have essentially joined this new crew, have joined, reformation, because again, as we know from the previous film, Voldemort's back. We go to their headquarters, which is called, Grimmauld Place, which essentially is the headquarters to the Order, and it's essentially his apartment, but it's kind of have this little jinx where it opens up and it's like revealed the actual headquarters in there. We get to, all the Order members are in the room discussing, but whilst that's happening, Harry, ends up getting acquainted with Ron and Hermione. He gets up them because it's revealed that, he hasn't heard from them over the summer. They've been not in contact with them. They then eventually go and say, like they were told not to by Dumbledore, sworn secrecy to not even try and get in contact with them. Harry then, of course, gets reacquainted with the Weasley twins. Fred and George are just great. And, of course, Ginny, I think. They try to listen into what the Order is saying, but of course, thanks to Hermione's cat, that is prevented. Just as that plan fails, not only does Harry get reacquainted with Mr. and Mrs. Weasley, again, he views them just as much as family, hell, they view him as family, but of course, that then opens up for his real family. First off, there's his father's friend, Lupus, who of course Harry's developed a very fond attachment to, and of course Sirius Black, his godfather. And the first thing he does as soon as he sees him is give him a big hug, really showing the bond the two have. At the dinner scene, they are essentially saying Harry, he's not being expelled, he's actually suspended. He's going to go before a trial before they can really decide on his being expelled. And the fact he's going in front of this wizard committee for a case of underage magic is huge. But Harry asks, what's the Ministry of Magic got against him? Mad-Eye Moody then says, might as well tell the boy, he'll find out sooner or later. So Shacklebolt hands him a newspaper, how it's saying, that essentially Harry is lying. Voldemort is not back, everything is alright. Lupin then reveals that, he's been smearing Dumbledore as well, In fact, has a smear campaign against anyone who's been saying that Lord Voldemort has indeed returned. And the reason why, because he thinks Dumbledore is spreading these lies so he could take Fudge's job. Harry says that is insane. No one in their right mind would believe that. That's when Lupin cuts him off and says that's the point. Fudge is not in his right mind. It's been warped by fear, and he's afraid that, that Voldemort is back. But he would do anything to avoid facing that truth, and clearly come up with this lie, as in his mind, this is more reasonable than going up against one of the dark witches and wizards in witch and wizard history. Sirius Black then reveals that they believe Voldemort is building up his army again. Not only is he recruiting followers, but other dark magical creatures, and is after something else. The others are trying to tell him not to tell Harry, but he says he's trying to get something within the Ministry, something he didn't have last time. And just as Harry is asking, Mrs. Weasley comes in and cuts him off, saying he's just a boy. If you keep this up, you might as well induct him to the Order. And like Harry's first instinct was, good, because I want to join. And it says, like, if there's going to be a war, I'm going to fight. And I just like how, Sirius Black isn't that smear, but almost like approval. Like, I can really see every time Black looks at Harry, he really sees his old friend, both, the person he went to school with, but most importantly, he could see Lily in him. He could see two aspects of his old friends in Harry, and I can think he and Lupin, I think out of everyone is the most protective, because this is the last, I guess, last real attachment to their old friends, which I really like. But here, Arthur Weasley then takes Harry to the wizard, to the Ministry of Magic, and it's through like what you call the public place. And here we actually get to see the Ministry, and it's a fantastic set. The set designers in this film absolutely outdone themselves. For me, I would even say this set alone is enough to rival 5 Bond villain layers, and that is a very big compliment on my part, because the fact it could rival that is absolutely fantastic. And I could really just and for me, it just opens the Wizarding world. We've always been told about the Ministry in previous films. We've seen members of the Ministry, but we've never actually got to see the actual Ministry, like the actual location, so it's fantastic here. Harry is quickly then taken to his trial, where he is, seen by, where Cornelius Fudge is presiding, essentially the judge, and of course other notable members. And he's essentially trying to prosecute him for using underage magic. Harry's saying, did he use a Patronus? Harry said, well, yes. And said, do you know the law that, underage magic? And he's like, well, yes. And just like how essentially he's trying to grill him on a fire, Harry then spats out, I was only doing it because there were Dementors. And everyone's taken back. Also should be noted that Dumbledore comes in kind of at, I want to say at the last minute, and it turns out, judging by dialogue, they tried to purposely give him the wrong timing and hoping he'd miss. And thank goodness Dumbledore comes in to really help. I also love how, as Dumbledore steps in, he reveals his full name to everyone, and arguably it's one of my favorite moments. And if you're wondering, his full name is Albus blah 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 Brian. I love how the Brian bit is like, you get like it's like Albus Pacific Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. The Brian, oh my god, that just cracked me smile. It's like, whoever, again, JK, if you really came up with that, those whose middle names, his middle name Brian, someone give this woman a prize. That is just one of my favorite moments. Anyway, but back to the trial. As Harry says his Dementors, some are taken back. However, Fudge is saying, well, that's pretty clever, as Muggles could not see Dementors. Highly convenient for you. As Harry's trying to prove himself, Fudge tells him to stop, as he sure was a very rehearsed story, but since he can't produce any witnesses to the event, he says, well, technically, we can. As they produce that same squib from early in the film to come to Harry's defense. And I love that bit, it's helping his defense, and, is proving Harry's point. However, Fudge still can't believe that Dementors would be out there. I mean, the odds of that are just not possible. And just as Dumbledore says, well, I highly doubt they would be there by coincidence. One of the, I guess, presiding judges on the thing raises her hand. This is Dolores Umbridge, and says how, in a calm voice, how shocking, how you're saying, it almost sounds like you're suggesting that the Ministry ordered the attack on Harry. And I like how Albus says, that would be a disturbing matter indeed, madam. So I'm sure that the Ministry were making a full-scale inquiry to why two Dementors were that far away from Azkaban and clearly without authorization. However, he does point out that Voldemort could be behind this and implores Fudge to see reason to this. Fudge, however, refuses to believe that Voldemort is back, and I like how he says that he's not back. You can clearly tell just how scared he is of the fact that, the Voldemort being back. The idea of it, he again doesn't believe that, but you can tell it scares him. And I guess you could see this where Dumbledore kind of gives up on trying to prove, Fudge that Voldemort's back. So he walks around and saying how, in the matter of Harry Potter, law clearly states that magic can be used in life-threatening situations regardless of underage. However, Fudge can say laws can be changed if necessary. And he says, well, really, I never know that there had to be this big, well, essentially trial for a simple case of underage magic with evidence presented in Harry's defense. And I like how Dumbledore proved his case and proved just how ludicrous this whole thing is. And the trial ends in Harry's favour, with only a few voting him guilty, with the majority voting him innocent. Well, one of the few to vote him guilty, other than Fudge, is, of course, Dolores Umbridge. But Fudge begrudgingly has to clear Harry of all charges. Just as Dumbledore walks away, Harry tries to talk to him, but Dumbledore keeps walking, almost completely ignoring him. And this really plays into Harry's psyche throughout the film. We then go back to the usual platform, where just before Harry's about to board the Hogwarts Express, he runs into Sirius Black, who's of course in disguise as a, normal dog, again, showing how he is like a loyal man's best friend. They have their usual conversation talk, and here Black takes a moment to show pictures of the original order, which Harry's parents were a part of. How he says how a day goes by, he doesn't miss his dad, and I'm assuming his mother too. We also get a little scene where, we see Neville's parents, and it's like, those are Neville's parents? And judging by Sirius Black, I think he had a very good relationship with them. And especially when he says the line, they suffered a fate far worse than death, if you ask me. And I also like the line how, if they think a war is actually coming, he says, yes, I do believe a war will be coming. Eventually, Harry's on the train. We get more of these famous shots of, Harry's Harry's mental state, or the magic, because he and Voldemort definitely share a connection, and this will be explored in future films, really affecting him. Just as Harry gets to Hogwarts, he bursts out, lashes out at Draco after Draco makes a comment of, there's a cell in Azkaban with his name on it. However, as he snaps, Ron tries to pull him away, and Draco walks away. And Ron says, come on, it's only Draco. Just as they're getting on the carriages, on these magical carriages, they come across these creatures. It's revealed to be Thestrals later in the film, but the thing is, only Harry can see it, the rest can't. However, a woman says he's not mad, as she can see it too. And here we get revealed to Luna Lovegood, an absolute fan favourite, and arguably one of my favourite characters in Harry Potter. She's so kooky, weird, a little crazy on the outside, but she couldn't really harm a fly. And honestly, perfect casting choice. And automatically, she's definitely memorable from her first scene alone. As they get on the carriages, they then go into the Great Hall where they have their celebratory feast. Dumbledore then comes and does the usual announcements. He says Hagrid is away, and Harry, Ron, and Hermione are curious as to why. We also hear reveal the new defense against the dark arts here is Dolores Umbridge. Harry happens to know her from the trial and voted, for him guilty, and tells the rest. Umbridge then steps forward and essentially takes control of the room and almost treating everyone there like children. And this is where everyone realized that for once the Ministry is going to play a huge role in almost controlling Hogwarts. We then get a scene where Harry is, in the, Gryffindor dormitory, where, everyone's just looking at him weird, clearly reading the newspaper article of him lying about Voldemort's return. And, and he basically tries to, talk to his friends, like Dean, and saying how Dean and Seamus, how if they had a good summer. He said he's had, how Seamus steps up and essentially goes to Harry and basically goes and says how his parents did not want him to come to school this year because of you, because of all these lies. And I like how Harry says, "You think I'm lying?" And he goes and says, "Well, no one was there, Harry, the night that happened." And I like how Harry is snapping back at him, saying, you know, how he must go and read the newspaper and believe, and, you know, to believe all these lies your mother obviously Seamus is offended, you know, dragging, you know, his mother into this. And it's like, you're calling, and it's like, don't drag my mother to this. And it's like, I'll drag in anyone who thinks I'm a liar. It's only Ron that helps, you know, break up the fight. Harry is lashing out. But the first two were reasonable, Dudley and Draco, because honestly, they deserve it. But Seamus is one of his friends. Granted, you can argue Seamus kind of, you know, Seamus' fault, but even then, there was no reason to. And this is especially worse when they go up to the rooms, and Harry lashes out at Ron. But Ron backs off, walks away. You can clearly tell that, you know, Harry's going through the motions here. We then go to a scene where Harry, you know, is in his defense against the dark arts class, and Umbridge is teaching. But surprisingly, the teaching is different. Instead of a traditional witch and wizard class, it's more of a theory class. Everyone's handed ministry-approved guidebooks, which is confusing everyone. Umbridge honestly teaches the class like, you know, they're you know, little kids, rather than the fact, hello, they're 5th years, and this is a magic school. You're supposed to actually teach them actual practical magic, not just theory. And this is just shocking them. It eventually leads to, again, when Hermione says there's no spells in these books, especially defensive spells, because this is defense against the dark arts. How Umbridge says, I don't know why I need to learn spells in my classroom. Ron is confused, like, we're not going to learn any magic. And just as Harry, you know, saying how they're trying to do a new risk-free way, but Harry says, well, if we're going to get attacked, it's not going to be risk-free. And Umbridge immediately balks at him and says students will raise their hands. Ironic, because Ron didn't raise his hand, but she answered his question. But Harry balks back. Get this lashed, almost like a stern talk to. This eventually leads to her saying school is all about and how theory, you know, will prepare them for what's out there. Harry says, well, what's it going to prepare us for? For the dangers that's out there. And it's like, and she's saying, there is no danger. Who do you think would want to harm people like you? And Harry just straights, I don't know, Lord Voldemort, and the room goes quiet. I always love this little thing that's always carried on to films. People have always been scared to say Voldemort's name. It is always he who must not be named, or the Dark Lord, or whatever. But however, just as Umbridge is basically, you know, says pretty much in front of the class that these rumors you're hearing with a dark witch, dark wizard on the loose, it is a lie, and gives essentially Harry detention after he screams out, you know, it's not a lie. And, you know, how saying, so what, you think Cedric just dropped dead of his own accord? And essentially, it's a back and forth argument until Umbridge shouts at Harry to, you know, silence, and he will be given detention. See him after class. After class, Harry is given this pen and has to write out, I must not tell lies on a piece of paper. And says, keep writing it until the message sinks in. Just as he's writing it, something begins to write in Harry's hand. It's some kind of jinxed feather pen that literally writes in his hand, I must not tell lies. It is a gruesome and almost horrific scene, and how Umbridge looks completely unfazed by it. Almost, you can tell just by looking in her eyes, she's getting a kick out of it, and saying, does the message get in your head? Naughty children deserve to be punished. There's something so unsettling about Umbridge. The actress here does a fantastic and remarkable job in portraying a character like this. It is just so almost unsettling how a character like this is portrayed, and I absolutely love it just for that fact. We then get a scene back at the Gryffindor dormitories where the Weasley twins are selling essentially what a magic joke candy, and it's quite a thriving business. We get another scene between Ron and Hermione, little scene, and again, it's further, for many fans, I'm sure, shipping the two to be together, you know, to be a couple at some point in the series. They then notice Harry, you know, how he's alone, he has this writing on his hand, and it's brutal. Umbridge, they tell him must tell someone, he's like, no, I'd rather give Umbridge the satisfaction. They really try to help Harry, but Harry is almost blocking them out. I love this because it shows, like, what Harry's going through, and it really is help to furthering his character, you know, and showing, like, again, what he's going through, all he's been through, and no friend around him can really understand what he's been through. Well, with the exception of one, I think. And honestly, this is just another great, scene. And again, further shows this character, Harry's essentially, I would say, mental state, and how it's really just affecting him in my opinion, all the wrong ways. The next scene is Harry, just walking around the Hogwarts grounds. He goes to Hagrid's place again. Hagrid not there. Only to go into the forest where he runs into these Thestrals again, and of course he runs into Luna Lovegood again. Luna explains he's again not going mad, and he explains Thestrals. Thestrals are basically these creatures, but they can only be seen by people who essentially, have witnessed or seen death. And this also ties in Harry, because he witnessed Cedric's death for the first time ever. He's actually witnessed a traumatic event of actually seeing a death in front of him. He really could not have seen his parents die because he was just a little kid, but here he could actually see his parents, a friend's death in front of him. And of course, this really changes Harry throughout the film. And also here's where he begins to bond with Luna Lovegood. Now, I know that these two are never going to become a couple because, again, I've seen all the films and I know, what these characters, will go through. But honestly, these two are just so perfect on screen. I really wish that these two, at least in the films, could have been a thing. But it's not meant to be. We get the next scene of them in the Great Hall having breakfast, reading. And here we hear McGonagall getting into an argument with Umbridge, courtesy of, how Umbridge has been treating students. And I love the standoff between the two. How these two actresses are just doing this, it's just, there's really great, there's such an energy that these two are bringing with this argument. Eventually, Umbridge kind of wins by essentially having McGonagall step down. Umbridge says that things are worse at Hogwarts and that the Ministry of Magic must take immediate action. We get this really great montage with the newspaper clipping and this montage of essentially Umbridge further taking over the school. How she's been appointed as this in this position of essentially to enforce rules, which Fudge says is to help with the lacking standards at Hogwarts School. And here Umbridge, relishes in this role, making extremist rules, really imposing her own, control of the school. And it's really just showing to a character that what she craves is power and a little, I wouldn't say respectability, but I would say prestige. And, again, the actress in question is phenomenal. The fact that a woman, we look at this woman and she's wearing this pink, she should be this motherly figure, but she's really this vile, almost villainous role. How she pulls this off, I will never know, and I wish I, could understand more. This then leads into arguably one of my, I'd like to say, I would say favorite scenes, but it's where she kicks Snivel out of the school, where essentially, dismisses her, is the term, where you're facing fire from her teaching position, and she's getting kicked out. Filch is packing up her bags and is kicking out. Filch says she's been teaching here for God knows how long. Hogwarts is a home, she can't do this. And I like how Umbridge smugly says, actually I can, in that, calming, almost motherly way. And McGonagall comes to her defense. From what I've been hearing from the books, these two characters, McGonagall and Snivel, never really got along. In fact, McGonagall always looked down on her. But in this scene, she shows true compassion to her. Again, she doesn't deserve this. She's generally a nice person. She may not be a great teacher, but she is a nice person. And I like how Umbridge says, oh, there's something you'd like to say to me. And she's like, oh, there's plenty of things I want to say to you. Only for Dumbledore to come to the rescue and say, Miss McGonagall, could you please escort Snivel back into the grounds? And of course she does. Umbridge is furious, a little bit furious at this, saying with her position she can fire. However, Dumbledore has a little clause in here saying, you have the right to dismiss my teachers, however, you do not have any authority to banish anyone from the grounds. A power like that only remains with the headmaster. And she says for now, this kind of foreshadowing a little bit here, which I like. Dumbledore says everyone get off to class, and Harry's once again trying to, get Dumbledore's attention, but he ignores him. And I love this scene how we show how, as soon as all the students leave, Harry's alone. And this was always one of my, if not the favorite part of, the movie, how Harry is just constantly alone and really on his own. honestly really just showing just how isolated Harry is further becoming as the films go on. We get back to a scene where they're in the dormitory, the trio are back in their dormitory and are discussing just how things are getting out of hand. The magic that they're being taught is not going to help them with this oncoming test, and they're hearing further news reports of people disappearing. Clearly Voldemort's behind this, but Fudge says the blame is on Sirius Black, as he believes the one to be responsible. As we know in the third film, people believe that Sirius Black was actually a follower of Lord Voldemort, but in reality he was not. He was famed for it, and it was really a friend, Peter Pettigrew, who did that. We then, of course, get another contact from Sirius Black to the gang. How saying, well, what's going on? How they're not being taught magic, and Black says, I'm afraid of this. Sirius Black is trying to prevent kids at Hogwarts from learning magic, as he does not want the kids, as they don't want children to be trained in combat. Ron remarks, what, does he think that they're building a wizard army? And says, that's exactly what Fudge thinks. He's becoming more paranoid, and with these disappearances, this is how the last war started. Voldemort's on the move, and things are just getting more and out of hand. Eventually, after that, call, where we would say, Hermione realizes that, they need to be taught magic now, where things are just getting further and further out of hand. So, they need someone who, has that real experience fighting these dark creatures, these dark magic. So, Hermione sets up a meeting in what's known as Hogsmeade. It's this village. We've seen it before in the third film, and I think it makes its return really here in this film, where essentially Hermione organizes a meeting with some Hufflepuff students, some Ravenclaw students, and some Gryffindor students. Essentially, how they're saying, they need to be taught by someone who's actually had experience against the dark arts. And again, we do see some conflict here. Some, again, still don't believe Voldemort's back. How they're saying, oh, just because Dumbledore says it and Harry says it, the question is, where's the proof? One says, how about if Harry just talks more of how Didrik died? And this strikes a nerve to Harry. He says, well, if you want to hear this, get lost, I'm not here to talk about that. And basically, just as he's about to run off, saying, how they view him as a freak, Luna kind of saves the whole meeting from going to hell by saying, is it true Harry can produce the Patronus charm? And he says, yes, he can. And other students also press forward about, how he fought like Harry says, how he fought, a basilisk down in the Chamber of Secrets. Ginny agrees to this because, again, she was there. She was the reason they were down there. And he fought like several Dementors at once. I'm surprised no one brought up the fact, he was in the Quidditch Cup. There's no way, his skills in that helped him survive. And I do like the people that are helping defend Harry, other than Ron, other than Hermione, and other than Ginny, is definitely Neville. And even Luna Lovegood. I personally love these characters. And this really shows. Again, Hermione says he really did fight you-know-who last year. Harry then cuts him off and says, guys, as much as praising that all is, half of that was just luck. Okay? That was real. It's different in school. Okay? When you fail, you can try again. You're out there. One mess up, it's game over. And I like how, and what I like about Harry is he's modest about it. He's saying all that was pure luck. But this fully convinces many, to get on his side. And I think what really helps is when Hermione says, then show us how to defeat Lord Voldemort. She actually goes and says Voldemort's name out, showing a confidence. And essentially, this is where Dumbledore's army is formed. And basically, all the students sign up, from the Weasley twins to Ron, Hermione, Harry, Luna Lovegood, Ginny, Cho Chang, who happens to be there, and especially Neville, Dean Thomas, and Seamus. Everyone signs up to teach real, actual magic. However, and just as they're, planning, to do these magics and when to do it over, spells they need to do, Umbridge is slowly getting word of them forming this club, and so she has a law that, school activities must be approved by her, and any are considered illegal. There's this then scene where Neville is running, walking, and gets bullied by Crabbe and Goyle. He basically and you can clearly see he's wishing to be a lion, and there this magical door suddenly appears to him. It's revealed that this is what's called the Room of Requirements. I love how Neville is the one to find this. Again, in this film, we get to see more character development from him than anyone else. Well, maybe with the exception of Harry, and they use this as their DA meetings to have all the students come there and practice their magic skills. And here we get a montage of them, you know, practicing their magical abilities, and of course trying to avoid getting captured by Finch, who's trying to capture students from being part of this illegal club. And also the formation of like these Slytherin boys forming what is essentially called you know, the Inquisitorial Squad, to essentially catch him in these acts. But I like how they just keep failing and failing and failing. And I like how the scene really ends with Neville, who was throughout these montage not practicing well with the magic, but only for him to really come into his own. We get a little fun moments, cheeky moments, especially from Ron and Hermione, and essentially they end the summer there, and we get a nice little moment between Harry and Cho Chang. As we know from the previous film, Harry has a crush on Cho, and they share this little kiss, which again is a little bit of a fan favorite moment to some, and this is then followed by, you know, the scene where they're at the dormitory, how, you know, all this craziness, and I like how it's this like funny moment, but it's built so naturally, because again, in previous films, some of the slapstick and funny moments of the series can be a hit or miss, but for this is a real hit for me, and I absolutely, again, love it. But at the same time, I feel maybe it wasn't that fully necessary. We then get the scene of Harry having this dream where, you know, where Arthur Weasley is attacked by a snake. He then essentially goes to, you know, Dumbledore with McGonagall's help to tell Dumbledore about this. Dumbledore is worried. He then tells some of his paintings to go and check if Arthur Weasley's okay. He then tells one to go to the rest of the Weasley family and, you know, inform them. And essentially all the Weasley kids are woken up and essentially about to go. Harry is going through some mental problems. He's like, but, you know, he just needs someone to talk to. And I like how we've seen him get snap at people. Some of them are justified. Some of them aren't. But here, he snaps at Dumbledore, and that's a little bit out of character. He snaps at him, says, "Look at me, what's happening?" I just love how that snap, you can tell, like, Harry is just concerned, he's overwhelmed, he's scared, he doesn't know what's going on. This is where Snape comes in. And Dumbledore, you know, asks Snape to take Harry and, you know, teach him how they're saying how Voldemort is piercing through Harry's mind. However, they don't know if Voldemort knows this or it's just by accident. So now they have to teach him this spell where he can control his emotions and control this, you know, mind thing. And I can kind of have a feeling Snape is almost getting joy out of this, torturing Harry. But I can see that this is really affecting Harry, really a lot. Then followed by seeing it's Christmas time where Harry is at the Weasley place to celebrate Christmas at their place. We get, you know, also Hermione's there. Nice little scene between Hermione and Ron. And I love this scene how while all the Weasley families and Hermione are all there, you know, celebrating the Christmas holiday, Harry's on the other end. Even though he's technically really part of the family, he's almost isolating himself from that family. I love how Mr. Weasley, you know, cheers a toast to Harry because it's really Harry's information that helped save his life. And again, Harry runs into Sirius Black. Here, Harry then runs into essentially what you call the family room with all these pictures of family names and also a blacked out thing. We find out that the headquarters that the Order is using actually used to be Sirius Black's old childhood home. And he revealed again that Sirius Black does come from a pure-blood family. He comes from this dynasty almost. But however, they black out when, you know, when families, you know, leave. You know, either choose to leave, don't want to be a part of their pure-blood traditions. Harry, you know, Sirius Black was essentially kicked out of his family. And when Harry asked, "Where did you go when essentially the family kicked you out?" he then turned and said, "I went to the Potters, your father's. I was always welcome there." You can really see now why Sirius Black has such a close attachment to James. He was not just a friend, he almost viewed him as a big brother. And I like how this is one exchange where Harry says, like, these emotions, how he's there. He feels like he has a connection to Voldemort. What if he's becoming bad? What if he's becoming like him? And Sirius comes to his defense and says, "Harry, you're not a bad person. You're a very good person, so that a lot of bad things happen to you. We don't decide whether we're good or we're evil." And I like how this really just shows the bond And unfortunately, this is really the bond between these two is gonna lead to one of the most, I say, infamous moments later in the film. We've got a long way to go. We then zoom into a picture of a woman within the family tree of a Sirius Black tree, but we'll get to that a little bit later. We go back to Hogwarts, where we find that Hagrid was just in a conversation with Umbridge, and of course the trio are glad to see Hagrid back. They have a conversation with him, ask where he's been, and he's been on a mission to help recruit giants to Dumbledore's side, but most of them have teamed up with Voldemort instead. This is further emphasizing that a war is coming, and I like how it transitions to this very dark, almost grisly scene. We then transition to a place that we've heard many times in the series, and that is, of course, Azkaban Prison, something we've heard since the second film. And this is basically where all the dark witches and wizards, or any other dark magical creatures, are held, and it's where the Dementors essentially are prison guards. There is a massive prison break, releasing one of the most infamous villains in the Harry Potter series, Bellatrix Lestrange. She comes laughing out manically, and honestly, Helena Bonham Carter absolutely owns this role. And again, I remember her from something. She's been, she was in Sweeney Todd. She's been in Tim Burton's Alice in Adventures in Wonderland. She's just crazy. I get another newspaper montage of how a prison escape with high-profile, dark witches and wizards were released. And again, Fudge believes that this is the work of Sirius Black. And then we then turned to Neville's face. Almost looks concerned and distorted. Hermione says, "Oh, this is getting out of control. Fudge needs to get it together, or or people are going to get killed, or maybe worse." It's this moment where Seamus goes to Harry and essentially apologizes, how he should have believed him, and I love how he kind of redeems himself, here, and essentially the friendship that he had with Harry is back together, and I just absolutely love that, how he's man enough to admit when he's wrong, and that really shows a bit of his character. We then follow Neville, who is in the room of requirements. Harry comes to him as he has a look at his parents. There's a kind of a bonding moment. I wouldn't say really Neville and Harry really bonded that well in the other films. I guess they were friends, but I wouldn't say he was tight as he was with Ron. But here we find out finally why he's been acting up. Something that was set up in the fourth film, and I love how it was carried over to here. It's revealed again, just like Harry's parents, Neville's parents were also in the Order. After Voldemort fell, however, some of his followers, like Bellatrix Lestrange, Barty Crouch Jr., and two others, went on a rampage, to find their master, and they believed that, that the Longbottoms would know their whereabouts. They performed the Cruciatus Curse on them, where they were tortured basically into insanity, and they're forever locked up in St. Mungo's. Now, they don't really say this in the film, but they do use some of the dialogue to imply that. And again, this is more taken from the novel, but most of this has been translated well. I love how Neville says this one line, "I'm proud to be their son, but I'm not wanting everyone else to know that just yet." I like how this is really when Harry realized he and Neville are more alike. They both lost their parents to, dark witches and wizards. Arguably, I'd say Neville has it worse, because Harry's a dad, but Neville's a there, but he can never, but it's the pain that they're there, but he can't have an actual family with them, and that's what I absolutely love about it. This then follows to arguably how, where the two form their, I think that's the strongest bond they ever had, and this will continue in future films as they go on. The next scene with the DA is them learning to use the Patrotus charm, and it's essentially is one of the most powerful magics to really wield. Honestly, if they ever did more films, I could easily imagine Harry coming back to be a Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher in sequel films that ever did that with Harry's kids at school. I would actually pay to see that. Just as that's happening, notice some, weird vibrations going on, and eventually an explosion happens with Dolores Umbridge, the Inquisitor Squad, burst in, and they have Cho Chang almost as prisoner. They then take him to Dumbledore's office, where they reveal notes, and this is supporting Fudge's delusion that Dumbledore was creating this army to take over the Ministry. Interesting fact, Percy's here, one of the Weasley kids, but is actually siding with Harry. If you read the books or know a bit about him, which I had to do a little bit of research on, you find out that during this whole thing, Percy sided with the Ministry in this war between Dumbledore, Dumbledore with Voldemort, believing that the Ministry, is correct. Voldemort's not back. Dumbledore's lying. Percy kind of teamed up with them. However, as Harry comes to Dumbledore's defense, saying he formed this, Harry said no. What Harry did was under my orders. I'm responsible for this activity. Fudge essentially thinks he's won, and essentially goes to send an owl to the Daily Prophet to tell Dumbledore will be sent to Azkaban for this crime of trying to overthrow the Ministry. Which again, Dolores Umbridge is feeding, into Fudge's mind. However, Dumbledore realizes how they hit the snag here, as you think I'm going to come quietly. Just as they're about to round on him and take him down, Dumbledore does this fantastic magical maneuver, and essentially does a great escape with the help of the phienex from the second film we used in the second film makes its return, and Dumbledore makes his escape. My favourite line is how Shacklebolt gets up along with the minister. He turns and says, "Well, whatever you think, Minister, but there is no denying Dumbledore's got style." One of many people's favourite lines in the history of the film series. After that, Dumbledore is essentially on the run, or gone into hiding. And Dolores Umbridge has taken over and has become head mistress of Hogwarts School. She punishes everyone that was part of Dumbledore's army, where they have to participate, in that writing thing that Harry did with Must Not Tell Lies. And how she's so calm about it and gleeful is so... It just shows her immense talent. It also should be noted that the actress in question who portrays Umbridge has said herself that this scene made her very uncomfortable, almost sick, and it shows her immense talent that the character she's portraying here is drastically different to what she is in real life. We also find out all the DAs are mad at Cho, believing she sold him out, but we'll find out that's not entirely true. The trio then go to Hagrid, and he has to reveal a secret to them, as, if something happens to him, go and protect his half-brother. And we see his half-brother is a giant and is a bit dim-witted. And as she picks up Hermione, Ron's first instinct is go and help Hermione by smacking with a branch, but of course doesn't work or doesn't help out. We then get the scene of when Harry is walking and essentially trying to push everyone out, essentially, trying to do things on his own again. And I kind of like that, like he's pushing everyone out and wants to do things on his own. And we get a few more scenes with Harry doing these occlumency lessons with Snape to try and control his mind. And I do like we get a little bit of insight to what Harry's father was like in school. Something we were told a little bit in the third one, how Harry's father was quite the troublemaker. And Snape, apparently, judging by the dialogue, and even says, knew this firsthand, how, James used to bully him. Harry refuses to believe this, saying how his father was a great man. However, Harry, Snape says his father was a swine. Just as Snape's about to go and do the spell again, Harry quickly uses it, and we get to see a glimpse into Snape's mind. And we really find out that James was really a terrible person, and this really, cuts down into Snape really very much. This is especially, and tells him to get out. I love that scene, how Harry instantly regrets it, and has to come to the realization that his father was not entirely perfect. As he's happening, he runs into the Weasley twins who are trying to comfort this little kid who's clearly been through the same pen ordeals they all have with that thing being written into their hand. And it's just sickening how, how it says naughty kids deserve to be punished. And Harry is furious at her, but the Weasley twins are preparing to, pull a little special, what they call extracurricular activity. We then cut to the OWLs, which is essentially wizard test. Just as that's happening, as they're going through it, Umbridge realizes something's off, and the Weasley twins come in doing a magic spectacular. It's absolutely, magical. I know, corny, but it's true. And what I especially love is, the firework effects, the music just helps it, and I love how, again, for the majority of the films, Draco, Crabbe, and Goyle, even though they're bullies, they're really just comedic to get humiliated. It's fantastic. The whole sequence is, and it leaves with George and Weasley essentially leaving Hogwarts. They never fully graduated, and they just essentially became dropouts. They left. The school is, happy because, essentially, Umbridge has kind of been put into her place a bit. But this then leads to, Harry passing out, with seeing a vision of Snape getting getting tortured at the Ministry by Voldemort. He quickly runs, tries to get in contact to see if this is true. Hermione says, calm down, think this through. But Harry is emotional, and rightly so. Literally, Black is the only family he truly has left. As he tries to use one of the firewoods to get in contact with him, he gets caught by Umbridge, along with the rest of the Arturial squad, who ends up kidnapping Ron, Neville, Ginny, Luna, Hermione, all basically what I like to call the main six. And, they try to interrogate him. Umbridge summons Snape and says to use essentially the truth serum on him. However, he says it's impossible to use the last one of the interrogation with students, especially with Cho Chang. And everyone realized how, that, she didn't sell them out. She was compelled to. It was not her fault. Snape leaves, but Harry says some line about, something, to tip off to get Dumbledore to contact Dumbledore to send the Ministry there. However, when Doris asks what is he talking about, Snape says no idea, walks away. Umbridge, pretty much desperate at this point and also feeling a bit humiliated, realizes the only course of action is to use the Cruciatus curse on Harry. Hermione says it's legal, but whatever, says won't hurt him. Hermione uses a quick thinking to get Harry out of the situation and go to see Dumbledore's secret weapon. They go into the dark forest where Umbridge comes face to face with these, I forgot what they're called, but we saw these like centaur creatures, I guess, which we saw one in the first film. They make their return here, and it's this whole herd. We also find out that Umbridge is a bit racist, calling them half-breeds, and attacks them. However, she is then attacked by Hagrid's half-brother giant, half-brother that's pretty much a brother that's a giant, and the Thestrals then take Umbridge and take her away. However, when Umbridge asks for help, saying, Harry, I mean them no harm, Harry says, I'm sorry, but I must not tell lies. That has come full circle and is arguably one of my favorite moments. As Harry and Hermione meet up with the rest of the gang who have subdued Draco and the crew, Draco's crew, they realize they need to get to the Ministry now. Harry wants to go alone, but but this is the point where he accepts he can't do everything alone. He needs to, have a group of friends to help. They ask how they're going to get there. Luna Lovegood's there and said they fly, of course. They end up using Thestrals to fly there over to the Ministry. They then make their way into this room where all these fortune teller balls are, and essentially it's kind of like a prophecy room. Just as they're trying to find, what it is, Neville notes the prophecy and says, Harry, there's something with your name on it. It should be noted that this is clearly a hint because in the novel, on the books, it was hinted that Neville could have been the prophet, the chosen one, not Harry. But however, because of circumstances happened, Harry became it. So it's a nice little nod there, and I like how it's him who finds it out. This then leads to, as Harry gets his hands on it, he comes face to face with all the Death Eaters. Lucius Malfoy is here, Bellatrix, and a whole bunch of others. And basically, they're trying to force Harry to hand over the prophecy. Neville kind of has a little bit of a standoff with Bellatrix, and I like how Neville's first reaction is to point his wand, especially at Bellatrix, clearly intending to have revenge. Harry said, if you hand the prophecy, everything will come clear. I like how Harry says, I do want to know, but I can wait. They then use a spell to quickly go on the run, and essentially all six of them, Ron, Hermione, Ginny, Luna, Neville, and Harry, all use their spells to knock out Death Eaters. They then cause a massive damage to all the other prophecies, and essentially run into what this room is. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but there's this arc thing where surprisingly only Harry can hear, voices coming from it. And just as he turns around, the gang is now surrounded by the Death Eaters, with each one, except for Harry, getting taken hostage by one. Neville especially getting held by Bellatrix Lestrange, and Lucius saying to hand over the prophecy to them. It's also revealed that the reason they needed Harry to come here to find the prophecy, because the prophecy only revealed to the ones who are made. As this is going on, Harry then gives the prophecy over, even though Neville says don't give it to him, showing a real character development. Harry gives the prophecy over to Lucius. only for the mood to suddenly change with Sirius Black suddenly arriving, and he says, "Get away from my godson." He punches Lucius, and just as Lucius falls over, tries to catch the prophecy, it is completely destroyed in front of him, and you can see the true terror in his eyes that this has happened. We then get into the scene where basically the Order's here fighting all the Death Eaters. It's great, action-packed. Again, Sirius saved Harry's life while all the Orders are trying to get the kids out of there. Even though Black says to tell Harry to get everyone out of here, Harry says, "No, I'm staying with you." But he says, "You've done beautifully, let us take it from here." Eventually, Sirius is ambushed by Malfoy and one of the other Death Eaters. Harry comes in to help, and the two take him down almost seamlessly. Sirius says, "Nice one, James," clearly for a moment confusing Harry to be his old friend James, and I really like that scene because it shows just how much Sirius does see James in Harry. This then leads to Sirius knocking out Malfoy, only for Bellatrix, who is of course Sirius's cousin, comes out of nowhere and shouts the killing curse Avada Kedavra, pointing it and firing it straight at Sirius Black. He then essentially killing him. He then falls into this veil thing almost out of nothing. I love how the scene just goes quiet with Harry yelling, but Lupus coming out trying to hold Harry back. But Harry quickly gets out of his hands and starts chasing Bellatrix, who Bellatrix is gloating how she's killed Sirius Black, only for Harry to quickly catch up to her and stun her. And just as he's about to do whatever, Voldemort suddenly appears. And just as the two are about to get into a confrontation, Dumbledore arrives. And Voldemort's face for a moment turns to dread. I think out of everyone Voldemort has feared the most, it is Dumbledore, and the two get into a duel. It is a fantastic and just absolutely great spectacular with really no music. The only thing we can hear is just the spells just constantly hitting each other. Eventually, Voldemort does do this big spell to at least undermine Dumbledore, and tries to begin to take over Harry's body, especially through his mind. Bellatrix uses the opportunity to make his escape. During this moment, we can see just all the pain Harry's going through, and Voldemort, gloating. However, Harry realizes something. He has friends and people that not only care for him, but he cares for, and he says straight up, "This is exactly what I'm fighting for." And honestly, that's just one of my favorite moments when essentially he defeats Voldemort by essentially coming true to himself. This was an arc that was slowly progressed. Voldemort then leaves his mind, and begins to make his escape. Around this time, Cornelius Fudge comes in with all the Ministry, and they view Voldemort actually being there and making his escape. Fudge immediately proclaims he's back. Dumbledore goes over to Harry to comfort him, along with the rest of his friends. We then get a great montage of how, Fudge is forced to resign, Umbridge is kicked out of Hogwarts, and it's revealed that, Voldemort is back. We then get the scene of Harry being comforted by Dumbledore, and how he basically says sorry for being, a ghost to him all year, but he thought he would do this in order to help, him take down Voldemort. Obviously not. He also reveals more about the prophecy. The prophecy further, tells a lot, how saying, that, these two are to be locked into combat, and the only person that can kill each other is the other. At the end, we see Harry and his friends leave Hogwarts, preparing for the war, and prepared to take, on whatever comes their way. For me, this is perhaps my favourite ending, as it's opening up that a war is coming, but Harry is more than ready to take it on, rather than compared to the other film, where it's opening up to, that things are going to change, which in many ways it did. This is really them opening up for a battle that none of them have ever faced before, and are ready to take it on. It's a really great ending. Harry Potter and Order of the Phoenix is definitely, for me, a favourite film. It's in my top 3 almost pretty much instantly. What I love about this film, it's more character development on Harry's part. And again, this really ties him well, because again, by this point, Voldemort's back, no one believes him, he's isolated, and it's focusing really on Harry. But even that, other characters get a chance to shine in character development. Again, Neville Longbottom. Arguably, one of my favourite characters from the series gets a lot of character development in this one. And the introduction to characters like Luna Lovegood, Belle, you know, being again, she's kooky, she's weird, but an absolute blast and joy to watch. Other evil characters we get introduced is to Bellatrix Lestrange, one of Voldemort's most loyal followers, Umbridge, you know, a villain we love to hate, and to many people they consider her a villain that is even worse than worse than Voldemort. Also, how Voldemort is portrayed this time around. He's more soft-spoken, he's less full of energy like he did in the previous one, but he's more calm, reserved, and almost more villainous, and I absolutely love him for that. I also love just the cinematography here, you know, with the montages and all that. It really tells the story very well. Another thing I absolutely enjoy with this film, that I think out of all of them combined, is it balances both the dark atmosphere from its predecessor films and the light atmosphere from the first two. As a result, it can balance both out and does really well. Again, I think Daniel Radcliffe gives the best performance of Harry Potter in this film than the ones combined, as he gets a chance to further explore. Also, the death of Sirius Black being one of the most iconic and most heart-wrenching moments ever in the series. It's truly astounding and fantastic. I love how, for this film, we are focusing more on the characters than less on the world. Something that's been done in previous films where it was really more of the world. The action is superb, and just how it balances all those aspects. This is, for me, a personal fan favorite. It's in the top 3. Another thing I love about this film, it's almost a political thriller. And it makes sense, because, again, with the storyline, no one believes Voldemort is back. They believe Harry's lying. There's political conspiracy, and it also just shows just how, even though we're seeing more of the Ministry world, as the audience is getting older, we're finding out that this magical world is not so perfect. A lot of it is pretty dark, and again, the films are getting darker just as our characters are growing up. The ending is perhaps, I think, the best of the series, only on par with the ending to the final film in the franchise, just in my opinion, just surpassing it. Overall, Harry Potter and Order of the Phoenix is, for me, in my top 3 films. In fact, it takes second place to me. But what is my favorite film in the series? Well, we'll find out when we get to it. And there we have it. That was Harry Potter and Order of the Phoenix, the 5th film in the franchise and a fan favorite to many, and arguably my second favorite in the entire series. After this film was huge. It was received very well critically, it did well commercially, and it's a fan favorite to many. With this, they continued with that success with the next film in the series, and the next one we'll be reviewing, which will be Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. That'll be the next film in the franchise we'll review, but until next time, this has been the Steven Hour. Ladies and gentlemen, so long for now.